The true meaning of the Exodus. End times truth revealed. The exodus of mankind from the creation till the end of times. I dedicate this series to every true Jew who thinks that he is a member of the chosen people of God, and to everyone who is proud and ready to fight and die for the city of Jerusalem, thinking that it is the holy sacred city of God. I also dedicate this end times revealed actual true meaning of the Exodus to those who seek God's satisfaction and deliverance, and to those who want to know the real concealed and hidden messages conveyed in the Torah, the Old Testament. Also to those who read the book superficially and thought that it is obvious and clear, or had doubts that the rules are too harsh and severe, and thought that false exaggerated statements are inserted in it to suit the objectives of a specific group of people. May God make you all pillars and members of His actual, real chosen people, those who inherit the glorious heavenly Jerusalem and live in it forever. And we begin by reciting a sentence from the Numbers, chapter 23, item 23. There is no enchantment against Jacob, neither is there any divination against Israel. Now it shall be said to Jacob and to Israel, what has God wrought? We ask here, first, which time does now refer to? Second, why does the prophecy say to Jacob and to Israel? Are they not the same? And the answer of the first question is, now refers to the time of the end. And the answer of the second question is, to Jacob, refers to the descendant of the flesh of Jacob. It simply refers to the Jews. Yet, to Israel, refers to the descendants of the faith of Jacob. That is, those who believe in the redemption of the Son of God. It refers to the Christians who believe in the salvation of the cross. Now we read from Matthew chapter 11, item 25. At that time Jesus answered and said, I thank you, Father, Lord of the heaven and earth, because you hid these things from the wise and prudent and revealed them to babies. Yes, Father, for so it seemed good in your sight. All things are delivered to me from my Father, and no man knows the Son but the Father. Neither knows any man the Father except the Son, and he to whom the Son will reveal him. Come to me, all of you who are tired from carrying heavy loads, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke and put it on you, and learn from me, because I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now we begin with a small preface. We say, in order to understand the real meaning of the Exodus, we have to understand Genesis, the story of the creation, and the sequential periods of the times And these are: the first period is really the story of Adam and his descendants in brief. In the beginning, God created Adam and Eve. Then the devil placed doubts in Eva's heart. She began to doubt the word of God, and her doubt grew till it became a full sin. Then she approached Adam and made him fall in sin for the sake of food. And he in his turn began to doubt the word of God, and thought that he would not die if he actually ate of the forbidden fruit. As a result, they were thrown out of paradise and became enslaved to the devil, sin, and death. But God clothed them and covered them and made a promise to them that the descendant of Eve shall crush and bruise the serpent's head, that is, the devil's head. Yes, at this very moment, God began to free mankind from the slavery of Satan, and man's exodus out of sin began. Later on, Adam got his first son Cain, then his second Abel. But Cain killed his brother Abel and became a criminal and a murderer. And God gave Adam Seth as a replacement for Abel. Thus, two nations rose: the descendant of Cain, the murderer, that is, the descendants of men, and the descendants of Seth, which the book refers to as the sons of God. Then men began to multiply, and the two nations intermingled and mixed together. And evil grew so great on earth that God chose Noah and his family as the selected, chosen good people of the earth, and he saved them by means of Noah's ark. Yet all the sinners, together with all that flied or crawled or walked upon the surface of the earth, so as the dinosaurs and the others, were all destroyed by the great flood. Nothing was saved except those who boarded the ark. Then God made a promise that no new great flood shall ever take place again on earth. And to confirm his intention, God made the sign of the rainbow as a reminder of his promise. Then men, that is the descendant of Noah, were blessed by God, who said to them, multiply, grow, and fill the earth. But instead of filling the earth and dispersing all over it, they started to build a tower in the land of Shinar, that is in Babylon, that they may not get lost or scattered. So God confused them and made them speak different languages to scatter them all over the surface of the earth. But once again evil grew so great on earth, and God could not break the promise that he had made. So instead of bringing a new great flood about, God chose Abram and his barren wife Sarai, and got them out of their ancestors' land and brought them to the land of Palestine, that is, the promised land. And now we go to the second period, and this is the period of the law. Here the story begins with God choosing Abram and his barren wife Sarai. Then he asked Abram to leave his land and go to the land of Canaan, that is, the promised land. In order to play his role, in the theatrical living story which begins there, and promises Abram that he will bless him with countless descendants. But after some time, doubt enters Sarai's heart, and when her doubt grows till it becomes a full sin, she approaches Abram and puts doubt in his heart and asks him to sleep with her maid Hajar in order to help God to bring about his promise and make it come true. So he gets his firstborn son Ishmael, the son of the flesh, from Hajar. But after 13 years, God appears again to Abraham, promises that he will give him a son from his wife Sarai, and sets a fixed date for that, and asks that every male should be circumcised as a sign in the flesh of a covenant that God makes with Abraham and his descendants. And after 1 year, Abraham gets his second son, the son of the promise, Isaac, from Sarah. And though it displeased Abraham, but Sarah insisted, and God intervened, the son of the flesh and his mother Hajar were casted out in order to separate the son of the promise from the son of the flesh, who began to persecute his brother. But God promised Abraham, saying in Genesis chapter 22, item 17, I will indeed bless you, and I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heaven and as the sand which is on the seashore. And your descendants shall possess the gates of their enemies, and by your descendants shall all nations of the earth bless themselves. So the descendants of the promise multiplied and became 12 grandfathers of Israel, together with their tribes. And the descendants of the son of the flesh also multiplied and became 12 princes and their tribes, but not like Adam's sons and their descendants. Here, this time, the two descendants, those of the son of the promise and those of the son of the flesh, did not intermingle or intermix because of the separation that took place. So the son of the flesh, Ishmael, lived in the wilderness of Paran, and the descendants of the promise went down to Egypt for the sake of food, and became later on the slaves of Pharaoh of Egypt. Then God intervened and asked Moses from the midst of the flames of the burning bush to lead the descendants of the promise out of the land of Egypt and the slavery of the Pharaoh. And God delivered heavy plagues upon the Pharaoh and his people. Then the descendants of the promise were delivered across the split waters of the Red Sea on dry land. Yet all the Pharaoh's soldiers, together with their chariots and horsemen, were drowned in the sea. And in the wilderness of Sinai, and on top of the mountain, God gave his people the law and the 10 commandments, and asked Moses to make the Ark of Covenant, similar to that Moses saw in the mountain. And when the faith of the descendants of the promise decreased, and they began to doubt God's promise that he will give them the possession of the promised land, God became furious and made them wander in the wilderness for 40 years. as a symbol referring to the future wandering of the symbolic chosen people of God in the wilderness of the law. Then all the circumcised generation who fell under God's wrath fell and died in the wilderness, and no one of them was allowed to enter the symbolic promised land, except for the two believers, Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua the son of Nun. And because of a mistake committed by Moses and his brother Aaron at the waters of Meribah, that is by the rock, they were not allowed to enter the symbolic promised land, and as a result they both died outside it. Then Joshua, the son of Nun, took lead of the symbolic chosen people of God and took them on the dry land across the river Jordan, which was split through a godly miracle. Then Joshua circumcised the people of Israel at Gibeath Harloth by the Gilgal, at the hill of the foreskins. And then he set for them 12 stones that were taken from the midst of the river Jordan, from the very place where the priest's feet stood as a memorial in the Gilgal. Later on, Jericho was given into Joshua's hand. God ordered him that a procession of all the men of war must go first, followed by the 7 priests bearing 7 trumpets, followed by the Ark of the Covenant of God, followed by the rear guards who carried drinking water for the procession, should march around the city once a day for 6 days, and 7 times on the 7th day. Then the walls of the city miraculously fell after the last procession, and the city was destroyed and burned with fire, and all the inhabitants were killed. Yet the Israelites were absolutely forbidden and prevented from taking any spoils out of the city. No one from Jericho was saved, except Rahab the harlot and all those who were in her house. Later, Joshua engaged war with the 5 kings of the Amorites, who were given into his hands. Also God intervened and took part in the war, and made great hailstones fall down on the enemies of Israel. And also God stopped the sun for a whole day over Gibeon, and the moon over Ayalon, as was requested by Joshua, who wanted to take vengeance of the enemies of Israel. The kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Yarmouth, Lachish, and Ajlon fled and hid themselves in a cave at Makkedah. And later on, they were brought out of the cave, and the chiefs of the war were told to put their feet upon their necks before they were killed. Joshua also made war with the kings of Hasur, Madon, Shomron, Akshaph, and the kings who were in the northern hill countries, and in Arabah south of Shenron, and in the lowlands, and in Dor on the west, to the Canaanites in the east and the west, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, and the Jebusites in the hill country, and the Hivites, a great army in number, like the sand of the seashore. Joshua smote them all, and no one remained. He hamstrung their horses and burned their chariots with fire. Finally, the war ended, and the land had peace. And now we compare the events and the personalities of the real living Exodus with those who played their part in the symbolic exodus. We begin. Adam took his part, Abram, and he was later named Abraham. Eve took her part, Sarai, and she was named Sarah. The heaven was symbolized by the promised land, the land of milk and honey. Adam's first son, Cain, the murderer, took his part, Ismail, Abram's first son, the son of the flesh. Seth took his part, Isaac, the son of the promise. Under the serpent's influence, Eve, doubt made Adam doubt God and fall in contempt. This was symbolized by Sarai's doubts, which made Abram doubt God and sleep with his slave woman Hagar. Food makes Adam fall in sin and contempt and becomes a slave of the devil. This was symbolized by food, which made the symbolic chosen people fall in the slavery of the Pharaoh of Egypt. God took his part, Moses, when God said to him, "You will be as a god to Pharaoh." The prophet Moses took his part, Aaron, when God said to him, "Aaron will be your prophet." The devil took his part, the Pharaoh of Egypt. The soldiers of the devil took their part, the soldiers of the Pharaoh. The slavery of the devil was symbolized by the slavery of the Pharaoh. The great flood in the time of Noah was symbolized by the Red Sea waters returning and flooding the Egyptians. The drowning of the sinners in the great flood was symbolized by drowning of the soldiers of Pharaoh in the Red Sea. The salvation of Noah and his family by the ark. This was symbolized by salvation of the Israelites and the crossing of the splitted Red Sea on dry land. The exodus out of sin and the slavery of the devil. This was symbolized by the exodus out of Egypt and the slavery of the Pharaoh. The law was represented by the burning Sinai wilderness. The crucifixion of Christ and his blood, the water of life, was represented by the striking of the rock to bring forth its waters. God's Ark of Covenant in the heavenly temple was represented by the Ark of Covenant, made similar to that Moses saw in the mountain. The salvation by grace and Jesus Christ's blood, that is the baptism, was represented by the crossing of the river Jordan. Christ precedes his real chosen people and enters the heavenly Jerusalem about 2,000 years before them. This fact was represented by the Ark of the Covenant preceded and entered the river Jordan about 2,000 steps before the symbolic chosen people. The river of the water of life flows from the throne of God in the heavenly Jerusalem. This was represented by the river Jordan and the Ark of Covenant that stood in the middle of the river. The 12 gates of the heavenly Jerusalem are 12 pearls, that they are named after the grandfathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. These were symbolized by 12 stones, which were carried by 12 men, one from each tribe of Israel, and were brought out of the river Jordan from the bed and made into a memorial in the Gilgal. The wall of the heavenly Jerusalem has 12 foundations named after the 12 apostles of Christ. This was symbolized by 12 stones were placed in the river Jordan around the places where the priests bearing the Ark of Covenant stood. The river of water of life is so deep in the heavenly Jerusalem it could not be passed. This was symbolized by the river Jordan, which in the time of the crossing flooded its banks. At the end of time, the real chosen people of God are saved and they enter the new heavenly Jerusalem. This fact is symbolized by the symbolic chosen people of God were saved and they entered the promised land and later on the earthly Jerusalem. In the time of the end, 7 angels with 7 trumpets end the earth and its sinners. This was represented by and took their part 7 priests who carried 7 trumpets and went around Jericho and blew their trumpets till the city fell and it was burned down. Jesus Christ reigns in the heavenly Jerusalem at the end of time. This fact is symbolized by King David, who reigned in the earthly Jerusalem. The soul was symbolized by the blood. The judgment was symbolized by copper. The believers of the New Testament took their part, Aaron and his descendants, the priests. God's goodness was symbolized by gold. The redemption and the salvation, this was symbolized by silver. The heavenly Jerusalem, symbolized by the earthly Jerusalem. The death and the burning in hell, body and soul of the sinners. This was symbolized by burning of the offering on the copper bronze altar. The prayers of the saints were symbolized by the burning of the fragrant incense. And then, in part 2, we shall explain the actual meaning of the promise of God to Abraham, what it really meant. Thank you.